Two, one. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Growth Secrets interview series. I'm here with Fred Diamond of the Institute for Excellence in Sales, and he's also the host of the Sales Game Changers podcast. Fred and I had a really great conversation before going live this morning. I think y'all are going to really enjoy this. Do me a favor, though. If you're watching this live on Facebook right now, just leave a comment that says live. But if you're watching this later on as a replay, do me a favor and just leave a comment that says replay. That helps us understand when we're getting our viewers so we know the right times that we need to publish these interviews. So without further ado, Fred, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you tell the folks who you are, what you do, and how you help people?
Reed, it's great to be on your show. I appreciate it. It's also nice to have just learned that we both went to Emory University, albeit 28 years apart. So it's always good to meet fellow Emory Eagles, I guess, Emeroids, I think we used to call ourselves.
Yeah.
So I'm based here in Northern Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C., and I run what's called the Institute for Excellence in Sales. Our mission is to help sales leaders acquire, retain, motivate, and elevate top-tier talent. And like you, I also host a podcast. It's called the Sales Game Changers podcast. We broadcast twice a week, every Tuesday and every Thursday. And I interview VPs of sales, chief revenue officers about their career journey. And we seek tips for how our listeners can take their sales career to the next level.
That's fantastic. So tell us, if you would, a little bit more about what the Institute does. Is it a training organization? Is it more of a networking or that type of organization? Help us understand what you guys do there.
Sure. We basically do three things. We're a membership organization. So organizations like Salesforce, Red Hat Software, IBM, they're all members of the Institute, and they send their people to our programs. We have a very robust sales leader program, a women in sales program. We do live events. Of course, we're recording today's show right smack in the middle of the COVID-19 virus. So we've had to do some adjustments, do a lot more things online. But basically, we do programs for sales leaders and their teams. We also act as a portal for sales services. So organizations around the globe come to us looking for sales training and consulting resources. And finally, we have our podcast, the Sales Game Changers podcast. So we also publish the content, insights, ideas from the sales leaders who we interview around the globe.
I gotcha. What have been some of the most interesting we'll say nuggets that you've pulled from that podcast? I know that I have just had such a great opportunity to learn from so many different people as I've been doing this. So I'm sure you've had some as well. So I'm curious, what have been some of your favorite moments?
So I've done over 220 shows. So a couple of them stand out. And here's the cool thing. When you interview successful people, they're all good. So I'll tell you right now, every show that I've done has been at least a great show. There's three that stand out. I know you're down in the northern Georgia area. Are you familiar with Dollywood over in?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I interviewed the VP of Sales for Dollywood. Her name is Cordelia Marzak. I actually went down to Dollywood for an event for one of my children, a dance competition, and I reached out, and her name is Cordelia Marzak, and we talked about Dolly Parton as a business leader, and everybody knows her as a successful entertainer, but she's just as great, if not better, as a business person. She's actually brilliant. She's made some unbelievable decisions. So Cordelia gave us some insights into her career. The other show that stands out is I interviewed a guy named Dominic Strada, and Dominic is a senior VP at Nestle. And he was in the Purina product line for a long time, and now he's in the Gerber product line. So man was brilliant. It was like almost like an MBA class in 35 minutes. But he talked about, just how you communicate to the consumer, how you need to constantly be changing, how you bring in your supply chain, including your down chain as well. And I love that one. And the other one that was great too is I interviewed a guy named Frank Passanante. Frank is the senior sales leader for Hilton in the USA. Hilton's headquarters is in Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. And Frank has been in the hospitality space for his whole career and seen everything. And of course, that industry right now is being very, very challenged. But prior to that, he just talked about how he built his team and how he trains them and how they practice before they go on sales calls, and how much of a practice mentality they had at Hilton. So every show has been great. I learned something from every show. There's some themes like persistence, mindset, active listening, questioning, a lot of things that you would think would be obvious, but they all come down to execution. It's easy to say, well, you need to be a better listener. Okay, great. Well, how do you be a better listener? Well, by asking better questions, by being more prepared, by letting the guest talk 90% of the time, or not guest, but prospect. So there's so many amazing themes that have come out. I'll tell you one quick thing. We get every show transcribed. So I have a transcriber who transcribes every show, and we make the transcriptions available. And I was talking to my transcriber, and she's a young lady who lives in Spain, but her English is better than most people that I know. And I was talking to her, and I said, have you enjoyed transcribing? And she said she's become such a better person by listening to our show. She's listened to over 200 shows. She's become a better daughter. She's become a better spouse. And she's just she was also going for her graduate degree. So she also understood better ways to ask questions and listening. So a lot of the things, people kind of take for granted, but you have to practice those things and get better at them.
So you said something that's really interesting. You talk about practice and execution, right? And I've always said that sales is like the ultimate execution-driven career, or I don't even know if I'd call it a career. I mean, I would call it a career, but it's so much a part of many roles, right? My father and grandfather were both entrepreneurs, and both considered themselves and spoke with a very high degree of pride to the fact that they were salesmen. And they used to say that everybody that comes in contact with a customer is in a sales role in that moment, right? And so that, and then the idea of execution, because your results are staring you in the face every day. You can't hide in a sales driven career, right? The numbers are what they are. So I want to then shift to something a little bit more practical and talk about sales, especially because it would be tone deaf if we did not talk about the elephant in the room, which is this COVID-19, economic shutdown that we're dealing with. You and I are very fortunate. We're able to continue in our business to at least a certain degree. A lot of people are much more hampered. What are you saying to maybe your clients or the people in your network about how they can continue to move their sales career and keep their pipelines moving in this, whatever we're calling this period that we're living through, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a couple of things that come to mind. So we're staying in touch with our customers who are VPs of sales and sales leaders at some of the best companies in the world. And there's basically three things. One is, if you're in sales right now, and again, we deal with corporate sales, enterprise sales, but one quick comment, we like to say if you have a spouse or a child or a parent, you're in sales at some level. We all are selling something, and sometimes there's a stigma attached to what sales is because people think, car dealerships and, someone like, trying to ram something down them. But the professional sales that we deal with, it's a very thoughtful career. To be successful in enterprise or corporate sales, you need to be strategic. It's not just about the charisma. You need to be thoughtful. You need to be someone who's willing to research, someone who's willing to learn, someone who's willing to listen. So right now, there's three things that we're hearing from the sales leaders that we deal with. One is everybody has a new job. So everybody has a new job. And the interesting thing is opportunity comes during times of challenge.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about all the industries that were built after 9/11 and the industries that were built after the 2008, recession, if you will. So even though we're right deep in the middle of it right now, there are still opportunities. So we're telling salespeople three things. One is, how do you be of service to your customer right now? Just be of service. Be a leader and be of service to your customer. Be of leadership to your constituency. How can you help them? Empathy is a key word. Just reach out without having to sell something. A simple email that we found to be very, very effective is, how are you? Just how are you? either via LinkedIn or via email, if you will. Second thing is you need to take care of your mind. You asked before, what are some of the key things that we hear? Mindset. When people ask me, what is the one thing you've learned by running the Institute for Excellence in Sales and having done over 200 podcasts? Everything, my friend, comes down to mindset. One of my favorite quotes is from Henry Ford. If you think you can or think you can't, you're right. So it's not easy, especially if you have little kids running around and, you can't go to the office. No one's going to the office around the world right now. I talk to people in Australia and Canada and the United States and Singapore. We have a member, and nobody's going to an office. So everyone is ensconced at their house. So how do you keep yourself focused during difficult times? We have an expression. It's called BMC, breathe, meditate for a minute, call a friend. Find ways that you can just kind of get grounded and get your mindset focused. And you know what, Reed, you have to keep that mindset. The moment you find yourself going down the path, you need to quickly get back on course. And we're spending a lot of time with the sales leaders that we work with to focus on that. And the third thing is, again, not just touch base with your constituency, but think about how you can provide value to them in the long run. Your customer may be going through some very, very difficult times right now, and he's not necessarily looking for solutions from you, but he will. Your customer will, because this will pass. It's going to be tough. You're going to have to tough it out. You're going to have to be creative. You're going to have to figure out, how do I get better right now? Instead of binging, shows on Netflix, maybe you use this time to listen to podcasts like yours and mine. If you look behind me, if you're watching this, this webinar, you see bookshelves with tons of books. Now's the time to read, to talk, and get better. So I think the successful salespeople right now are going to do those things. Be focused on their customer, touch base. Second, really focus on your mind. And third, build up yourself as a professional. One of the other key themes that keeps coming across at the IES and on the podcast is sales is a profession. You can't just become a VP of sales at Microsoft because you want to be. You can't just become a VP of sales at American Airlines because you want to be. A lot of the people that we've interviewed on the podcast, they've had 20, 25, 30 years of success. So how are you building yourself as a sales athlete for that opportunity?
Okay, so you mentioned two things that that I have to hone in on. So one of them, the last thing you said, I could not agree more. I think there's this, and I'm sure not the folks that you're dealing with feel this way, but on the, we'll say it on the entrepreneurial side of things, and I'll, without offending anyone, I think people who are a little bit younger tend to think that, well, I have this type of personality, therefore sales is my thing, right? I am comfortable talking to people, or I'm not comfortable talking to people, therefore equals sales, right? But that's only a tiny piece of what goes in to being a professional salesperson. I would absolutely agree that it is a skill. It is not a personality trait, right? Certainly some are a little bit more, we'll say, predisposed to being comfortable in that environment. But it's a skill. And I like the word you use, being that sales athlete, right? Just like you and I talked about before, both of us being, at least interested in sports, and right. And so you can't just expect to go out on the football field or the baseball field and just say, I want to be good, and so today I'll be good, right? It takes hours and hours of practice and execution so that on game day or on that sales call or in that presentation or when building out that strategy, you can actually be effective. So I see you're looking for a book there. Please go ahead.
Here's a book. It's called The Introvert's Edge. It's written by, do you know Matthew at all? It's written by a guy named Matthew Pollard. And basically his whole premise is how you could be successful by being an introvert. When I look at all the factors that go into sales success, here's the number one. I think the number one factor in sales success with everybody that I've met, it's not charisma, it's not energy, although those are important. It's courage. Do you have the courage to pick up the phone?
Yeah.
Do you have the courage to be interested in your customer's business? Do you have the courage to ask your manager for advice? Do you have the courage to practice? It just winging it, you're going to get caught, man, because here's the thing. Once things are like normal, if you will, and even right now, because of the internet and because of social media and now webinars and things like this, your customer can know more about your product and your service than you could probably tell them. The internet has completely flipped the sales world, if you will. The customer's in charge now. 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, salespeople were walking brochures. Your customer needed you for information. They needed you for product line direction and strategy. Now your customer can just type in and, what database should I use, or what cloud solution should I use? And, 10 million pages come up on your search engine. So how are you providing value to them now? So the energy and the charisma, energy is hugely important. Charisma, much less. It's how committed are you to your customer and them being successful? Do you have the courage to understand your customer's business? Do you have the courage to be vulnerable? One of the best podcast interviews that I ever did was with a woman called Alyssa Merwin. She's a VP of sales for LinkedIn Sales Navigator in Americas.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, she's fantastic. And she talked about vulnerability. One of her key leadership traits was being vulnerable. And when we posted her show, a whole bunch of people who worked for her or knew her commented on my LinkedIn post. Absolutely, that's what makes her a great leader and builds the trust, if you will. So, energy and shtick and hacks, that doesn't really work in sales. It's about courage. It's about preparation. It's about really being committed to helping your customer be successful, and for you to be committed to understanding what's going to help them be successful. Otherwise, they don't need you. They don't need anything that you have to offer unless you're going to bring value. And here's the cool thing about right now, as difficult as it is that we're going through, there's an opportunity for you to truly figure out what value it is you can bring to customers. I'll tell you right now, my company, the Institute for Excellence in Sales, we do live events. So obviously, if you're in the event business in April and May of 2020, it's a real tough time to be if that's all you do.
Yeah.
So we're now doing 4 webinars a week. We're doing a webinar as we speak. Today, it's a Tuesday. We're doing a webinar on Tuesday for women in sales. We're doing a webinar on Wednesday with 3 sales leaders from my podcast. We're doing a webinar on Thursday just on mindset. And we're doing a webinar on Friday on a sales lesson. For example, this week we're doing one on using LinkedIn to build empathy. So it's what we're doing right now to show our customers that we're committed to helping them at least get some information to help them be successful right now. Same thing you're doing with your show as well.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. I think, look, there's 2 ways that you talk about quotes that you like. One of my favorite quotes was that you're either getting better or you're getting worse. There is no stagnation, right? So there's 2 things people can do right now. They can squander this time, let their pipelines run dry. They can allow their influence to wane, or they can be creative. They can be bold, right? They can take a little bit of a leap of faith, because here's what I'm actually seeing is everybody is right now, we're all kind of giving each other a lot of grace. And what I mean by that is you have an opportunity to try something that you may not have tried a month or 2 ago, right? Throwing together a webinar in your home office has a level of charm and shows a level of grit and perseverance that maybe you couldn't have gotten that same emotion across 2 months ago or a year ago, right? So just doing something, you get a pass if it's not perfect, because we're all dealing with this. That's the unique thing about the situation. Everybody's dealing with this right now. So being creative and doing something to add value is going to help you move forward, as opposed to just falling out of your customers and your prospects' minds completely.
That's a great point. This is not a vacation. April is not vacation month. First of all, there aren't too many places you can go to right now.
Yeah.
If you want to take a vacation, It was interesting. I had an interesting moment 2 Tuesdays ago. Um, I did a LinkedIn post on working from home. So I've worked from home pretty much most of the last 20 years. I've had various offices here and there, but a lot of work I had done from home. And so I did a LinkedIn post. Here's 5 tips, and it was the first day when everybody was working from home. And the post got like 10,000 views and got like 200 comments. And this is again when it was new to a whole bunch of people. And I felt good about that, but I get a lot of people paying attention to our LinkedIn anyway. The next morning, I got an email from somebody who was on my show, who I'm not particularly close with, but he said, yesterday's post was amazing. You need to post more things about what people should be doing right now if they're in sales. And, I said, you know what? We're all more leader-ish than we might think that we are, especially because not everybody right now, Reed, is showing leadership.
Right.
I'm surprised at how many people have reached out to me because of our webinars and our LinkedIn posts and the things that we're doing, and have said, man, you guys are showing leadership right now. And I look around and I'm like, where's everybody else? Now there are a lot of people, but it's like, you would think everybody would use this opportunity, man. If you're in sales, you got to be showing your customers right now that you care for them, because your customers are going through a very, very difficult time. Everybody is going through a difficult time, but your customers are going, especially if they're in hospitality, entertainment, a couple of the big hotel chains are members of the Institute for Excellence in Sales. They're like, man, they're not doing events right now.
Right.
People aren't flying to hotels. So, 90% of the staff of hospitality industry and entertainment have been furloughed. There's no reason for us to have event staff if there's no events. So your customers are going through a very, very difficult time. You got to show empathy right now, but you got to show up. You got to show them that, hey, not can you help me by buying my thing today, because that's probably not the most important thing on their mind, unless there's something that they critically need. But at the same time, you just need to show up. I love what you just said there. You got to show up. You got to show them that you're there. Even something simple like, how are you doing today? Or, hey, do you want to touch base via Zoom later on? Everyone's at their home office. Everyone's showing themselves from half the torso up right now. So, I read a report yesterday that Walmart said that their business in shirts has like quintupled, and their business in pants is like falling way off, because everybody sees everybody from from the mid torso up. But just show up, man. Just LinkedIn message, just simple text message. Hey, how you doing? Thinking about you. They may not want to chat. They got their own problems, but at least show that you remember them right now, and that you're there at least to chat if they want to.
Yeah.
And that's that's sales, man. Keeping the contact.
Yeah. I mean, I could not agree more. Is that this is not a time to relax and to rest. I think I've been describing this COVID-19 arc. It went from what in the world is going on to the world is ending to, I guess this is the world now, right? And we kind of went through those different things. And for a minute there, everyone thought, well, maybe is this just a week? I mean, I remember we took our son to school on the Friday before they canceled school, thinking, well, maybe they'll just move spring break up a week, And so I think everyone felt like, well, let's just get past this. It'll be like a snow day, right? And maybe not for where you live, but in Georgia, when snow falls, everything shuts down for the half day that it's snowing, right? But then the whole week goes by, and then we're looking at another couple weeks, and now here we are at the time of this, we're looking at another month at least, right? And so it is not the time to just duck and cover and wait for the storm to pass, because we don't know how long the storm's going to be here. So adding value and being in touch with your customers and your prospects is the most important thing you can do. Fred, I want to be conscious of your time. So as we approach the end, and now I may hit you with something kind of off the top of my head, because I think you're a great person to ask this to. What do you think is one thing that you talk about mindset, you talk about daily practices? What is one thing that you want people to know when they walk away and they say, I just listened to this podcast with Fred Diamond, and he said this, and I know this is going to make an impact on my business or my life, right? What's that one thing you want to tell people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's so many things, but back to what we just talked about before, because of the timing of when you're going to be taking this out. And once again, Reed, thank you so much for having me on your show. I think you're doing a great job. And like I said, it's always nice to see that we had that Emory contact there as well. So I'm actually motivated to reach out to some of my Emory friends. Just along those lines, I think right now empathy is a huge word that keeps coming up. Everyone's going through stress. I mean, if you own a restaurant right now, and I live in Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C., and our governor came out yesterday and said that he wants people to stay at home until June 10th. So, if I own a restaurant or if I own a small store right now, everybody like started to do the response, which was we're going to open up for takeout and delivery. But, a lot of restaurants depend on alcohol. So if people aren't going to be there drinking 2 or 3 drinks, you're selling the low margin product, which are basically food. So if I'm owning a restaurant, it's a tough place to be right now. So I would say everyone's going through challenges. I'm trying to paint a powerful, rosy picture here for the salespeople, but we're all going to go through tough challenges because they say recessions, it hasn't happened yet. It's going to be happening in April. So the key thing is when you're trying to keep yourself balanced with your mindset, but use this time to be empathetic to your network, to your customers. Simple reach out. It's funny when we get people who call me trying to sell me something and they go right into the pitch. It's like, hey, I want to tell you about these leads that I can get for your business. Well, you don't know me. You don't even know if I have a requirement for these things. You haven't asked me anything about my business. So no, I'm not that interested in your leads right now or your tool. I hate when people on LinkedIn reach out to you and they go right into the sales pitch.
Yeah.
You got to spend this time. Empathy, again, is a big word that keeps coming up all the time. Let your customers know that, just let your customers know that you're out there, that, you're just, I know what you're going through, man. I'm here to chat, just checking in, just seeing how you're doing. Hey, I found this podcast or webinar that you may want to have your people be aware of, but how can I be of service to my constituency right now? And in a lot of cases, you just got to tough it out. It's a storm, like we said, and it's not an easy one or a fun one as it gets realer, but you have to do those 3 things.
Yep, I'm with you. I love that. I appreciate that, Fred, and I appreciate you for being on here today. Hey, where can people learn more about the Institute for Excellence in Sales and about Fred?
Well, the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. So just type in Fred Diamond on LinkedIn, and I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post something every day and I comment whenever somebody reaches out to me and asks me to comment as well. So that's probably the easiest way. And then you could find the Sales Game Changers podcast. We're still broadcasting shows every Tuesday and every Thursday. You could find that on the Apple Podcast Store. Just go search Sales Game Changers podcast.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to leave links here in the comments and in the YouTube description as well. Fred, I really appreciate this time. It's been great chatting with you, and I hope we'll get a chance to do this again soon.
Thank you. Thanks for reaching out.
All right. Talk soon. Everybody, thanks so much for watching.